and honor to welcome the moderator for this panel, which is on ethics and safety concerns in the adaptation of AI for media and civil society. Please, I would like all of us to please keep it down, but then make our clap very heavy as I welcome the CEO, CJID, Mr. Dapo Olorunyomi, for this power-packed panel. Thank you very much, sir.
I know I will do it. Oh, you can go ahead. Yes, thank you.
All right, Mr. Olorunyomi, obviously will not be doing this alone, so it gives me great pleasure yet again to welcome the second heavyweight on this panel. I do hope that this stage can hold the weight by the time they're all here. She is the CEO, Kadaria Media. A lot of us have come to fall in love with her on television and now on radio. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Kadaria Ahmed on this panel this afternoon. We also have on this panel the Executive Director, Spaces for Change, Victoria Ibezim-Ohaeri. Let's put our hands together as she comes on stage. Yes, so when I say on stage, I mean virtual on stage, but the clap did not waste. Thank you very much, and you're welcome, Victoria. And last but not least on this panel is Adebayo Adegoke, Manager, Paradigm Initiative. He's a man with a red cap. Let's put our hands together for him as he comes on stage. Thank you. It's over to you now, sir.
Okay, there's one more guy.
Right, yeah.
But it's proper to forget him.
It must have been the meal. There was something in that food. All right, last but not least again, we have a managing editor, Premium Times, Mr. Idris Akinbajo. Let's put our hands together for him. You know, we met before now, so this is not targeted at all. You know, that pepper soup and bread was quite good. You're welcome, Mr. Idris Akinbajo. All right, over to you now, sir.
Thank you so much, Kay, and welcome from lunch. You know, the danger of post-lunch events is that, but I hope that the extreme power and imagination of the lady and the two gentlemen will keep this alive. Thank you very much, folks. As I think we've been finding out from earlier today, the very important role that AI is playing and will continue to play in our industry is something that we have to pay extreme attention to. But again, like we say in our profession, there's nothing like journalism, there's nothing like professionalism if we are not layering it on ethics. Ethics is the ancient ladder, is the center of gravity that gives meaning and consequence to everything that we do in any profession. Naturally, something as momentous as AI in our profession will have to see. We can think of it in terms of the economic implications, the operational implications, but most importantly, the question will reside on what's the ethical framework around the evaluation of this practice and indeed how it affects the safety, liberty, and rights of people. So we are extremely fortunate. We have some of the brightest professionals in, I can almost say, the planet. But in this country today, these are great thought leaders in their own pattern. So, in helping us navigate what this will mean, first, What are the ethical implications of the practice itself? What are the implications of some of those issues that we've been asked to review from earlier panels today? Copyright issues, privacy issues, and indeed the economic implications of, these are serious ethical considerations. So I'll ask Idris Akinbajo, who's the managing editor, what's significant here, except for Adebayo, all these people also have been alumnus of the next newspaper, one of the most consequential journalism experiments of the last 10 or more years in this country. So I'm happy to bring everybody together here again, and I'll ask the guy who used to be Kadaria's reporter at Next, but who himself now is a managing editor of a newspaper. So we'll be asking Idris to help us open up with what he considers to be. Idris, it's an interesting person. The Shoyinka Award on investigative reporting. He has won the prize 3 times. He went on to win the African Investigative Journalist Award once. So that makes him preeminently the one person who can comment on this topic. So if we're talking about accountability in the media, investigative reporting is the arrowhead of that practice within that broad stretch of journalism. So Idris, could you help walk us through what the AI moment really means for investigative reporting?
Thank you very much, Mr. Olorunyomi, and thank you so much, CJID, for inviting me here. My former boss, Kadaria Ahmed, is here. I started my professional journalism career under our tutelage, so it's a privilege of some sort for me to be here on the same panel with her, and of course with Mr. Dapo Olorunyomi and the rest of the team. I think for us as journalists, and particularly for investigative journalists, we should be very happy that AI is here. We are not amongst the journalists or even professionals who are worried about the presence of AI. We believe significantly that AI can only better help us in the course of reporting to become greater investigative journalists, do our journalism better, and to be able to hold power more accountable. And while looking at how we utilize AI in investigative journalism, basically, there are 4 ethical concerns that investigative journalists must pay attention to. The first is that AI must not replace human industry. AI must not or should not try to replace the reporting that a human being can do or should do. And it's not just in terms of replacing reporting, it's also the fact that journalists must be conscious of the AI platform that they are choosing. We must be careful not to allow both tech companies and governments to force AI platforms on us or to force particular AI programs on us. So that's the first one. It cannot replace, it's not a replacement for human industry. The second is that AI must also minimize harm to journalists. Minimizing harm is one of the fundamental ethical principles of journalism. An investigative journalist must ensure that they minimize harm to the public, minimize harm to society, minimize harm to their sources, minimize harm to themselves as reporters. AI must not violate any of these principles, whether physical harm or emotional harm. Journalists must pay attention to potential AI programs that do so. The third is that AI must be fair. Fairness in the sense that we as journalists must pay attention to those behind AI and the purpose for setting up those platforms. With the earlier panel talked about algorithms used in some cases what the algorithms try to promote and so on. And for many of us who follow the AI topic, remember that just about 2 months ago, there was a whole concern about Gemini, the Google AI platform for images. And Google essentially had to withdraw it because clearly it was an unfair AI tool. There were complaints, even Elon Musk had to tweet about it, irrespective of whatever you agree with his own policies or not. Google realized that in terms of fairness to all demographics, that platform needed a lot of tweaking. So investigative journalists must be conscious to ensure that the AI tools they use are fair to everybody in terms of the way the programs are written and the way they are utilized. And arguably, the most important is that AI platforms must be transparent. They must be transparently designed. Investigative journalists overall must be concerned about how transparent the makers of the AI tools are. But also is that, like Juan mentioned earlier, journalists themselves must also be transparent to their audience when they use AI. So the transparency is both ways. One, we are interested in how the AI platforms themselves are transparent with what they are giving to us. Secondly, is that when we as journalists then use the AI tools, we owe it to our audience as a form of transparency to let them know that we have used AI to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Okay, yeah. Kadaria, I'd like if you will help us weigh in. When we talk of media, the central issue is the content. And coming from the digital to AI, one thing that's significant is just the question of bias. Idris has spoken of fairness, but when we come to the issues like deepfake, disinformation, and all that spectrum of information disorder, we're dealing with something that really can hurt, our audience, hurt citizens. Tell us how to understand the dangers of bias in AI content, and then how to mitigate, if possible.
Thank you very much, Dapo. Hello, everybody. I must first start by telling you that my knowledge of AI is actually really limited, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. I'm not a digital native. I'm not of that generation. So everything that we're doing that is digital is learned. And I think it's part of the weakness that you will find in the leadership of the media in the country. And sometimes a way to resolve a problem is by admitting first you have it. Now, having said that, there are sort of some basic principles around journalism, around ethics, that actually need to be part of AI. The thing with AI is that data is not neutral. We keep talking about, we need more data, but data is not neutral. When data is collected, more often than not, particularly in places like Nigeria, where there are disparities and inequalities, what you tend to have is that data reflects those inequalities and reflects some of the problems that we have internally. So we like talking about a problem between the global north and the global south. But even within Nigeria, there's a problem between the north and the south when it comes to media practice. The bulk of our media sit in a certain part of the country. And so there are biases, some of which are not deliberate. It's just a question of who is at the table at the time that data is being collected. And so therefore, I think there is a real possibility that if awareness is not brought to the use of AI within the Nigerian media space, we will carry the biases that currently exist, even in the way we report, into the use of AI. So I'll give you a quick experiment. You can do it now, or you can do it, at your own time. Go into Google, and so we're now talking about just simple search engine algorithms, and put in Yoruba. What you will see is a description of Yoruba as an ethnic group, as their culture, their tradition, etc., etc. You do the same thing with Igbo, and that's exactly what will come up. Put the word Fulani and see what comes up. Herdsmen, terrorists, killers, this one, that one. And so essentially the reporting we have in Nigeria if you use that reporting to train AI on either language or whatever it is you use to train it, though that reporting is going to influence the level of the biases that you see in the AI that you're going to use. And so that question of transparency that was raised by Idris is really, really important. But it is also a question of acknowledging that these things are a problem, if they are, and being intentional in building these models, in building these algorithms to sort of make changes. And we can talk about sort of how you do that, but I don't want to sort of hog the space. But just something to think about in terms of biases. AI can widen biases. So if you have a newsroom where, for example, let's say the political editor, because of a political agenda, is reporting in a certain way, and then unfortunately you end up using that newsroom as the basis for the machine learning, for the AI that you then deploy, what happens is instead of having one media organization that is problematic, you then expand that bias. And then other media organizations are taking that as the basis, and it's a problem. It's a serious problem. Let me stop here.
Okay, thank you so very much. So in essence, we really have to do a lot of internal education within our newsrooms. And this is a good segue to call on Victoria. Are we able to get Victoria? Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Victoria will offer insights. Yes. Into the essential checklist for newsrooms and CSOs before deploying AI. She will propose research and policy recommendations to guide the integration of AI and its potential impact on citizen participation. Victoria.
Thank you, Dapo, and fellow panelists and the members of the audience. Good afternoon. Greetings from Lagos. To continue the conversation for where the other panelists left off, I would like to also agree with what they have said. Agree that AI technologies that they've really brought respite to many business operations and to the work of journalists, to the work of activists. And it has really helped to ease the process of whether it's authenticating data, generating data, reducing drudgery for the most part, also enhancing information dissemination and many aspects of customer service. But however, if unchecked, there are certain aspects of AI that are concerning that we need to really keep a focus on the ethical and the quality, especially of news writing. What are those specific checklists that newsrooms, a lot of newsrooms are increasingly depending on robots to write news. It's now routine for a lot of news organizations to use artificial intelligence to write news. Robots are helping them to transform data into stories and using stories into multimedia presentations and all of that. But I think the first thing to be on that checklist is the need for authenticity, because why we call something news? News means new information, something new. I once tried to put, there's a Meta AI feature now on WhatsApp. One that I put in my name on that feature. I just put my full name, Victoria Ibezim-Ohaeri, and I got like $1 of information. And when I did a serious checking of that information, I saw that it was data gathered from different websites, that maybe information about my name that gathered, that crunched from different websites and presented to me as facts about Victoria Ohaeri, which means that so most times AI is just regurgitating news that's already published elsewhere. So it means that information that is generating is actually not completely new information. It does not generate fresh news. So development of fresh news, including breaking news, often requires a human element. And the first thing newsrooms need to consider is authenticity of the news, published whether online or offline. Then the second thing to look at is the intellectual property protections. If I put in my name and it crunched data from multiple websites and put it back to me, there are intellectual property conversations, because the original author, there is no consent from the original author to share that data. We cannot, it means that newsrooms cannot thoroughly explain how every story they are publishing came about. and whether the original author even wants the news to be shared with certain types of audiences. The data provider, whether they have even the legal right to send out that information and to publish it and on what platforms. So these are other kinds of considerations that newsrooms need to put into consideration. The other one that I think is also very important is the recognition of differentials and access to the internet. You know, not many people have access to internet or stable internet connection. There is a huge differential in internet access existing between those in urban and rural areas. Some companies like Meta, they've started rolling out initiative in response to these differentials. So you must have come across like Facebook Lite or Facebook Basic. Facebook Lite is like a stripped down or a basic version of the social media, Facebook social media app site. And what that site does is for those or users with slower internet connections or older devices. Then another thing we newsrooms need to look into, consider is their style. The robotic systems, they might not be producing or disseminating content that matches your style. Like we know Wazobia FM is known for their humorous approach to broadcasting. Is that I think they're the first, I'm not sure, but I think they're the first pidgin radio station in Nigeria. And they produce programs, most of the programs in pidgin English, and it's enjoyed by wide categories of people. So you need to be sure that robotic systems you're deploying understand your style and the demands of your targeted audiences. Kadaria started by admitting knowledge gaps. So there's the importance of self-accountability. Who's behind the machine? Who's controlling the algorithms? You know, errors with the automation software. It can result in the production and dissemination of erroneous stories, misinformation and disinformation. So there is need to subject robot written stories to human editors for fact checking, for spot checking to eliminate potential error. And lastly, I think Idris started by talking about the role of AI is not to displace humans. So the conversation is for newsrooms, are you using AI to reduce your human staff? In a country like Nigeria, where unemployment rate is on all-time high, this it raises ethical issues if the real reason of using AI is to use it to minimize the number of staff or human workers in the newsroom. I think that is also another ethical conversation that needs to be had. One last thing I would like to talk about is the concern around racism. I think many of you must have seen when someone put out an image. Somebody said they put in an image of AI should generate an image of Mother Teresa fighting poverty. They showed the picture of Mother Teresa killing a lot of Black people with knives. So that brings up a conversation about the racialization of artificial intelligence, where a lot of AI algorithms have, started racializing images of poverty, racializing images of Black and white, attributing superiority to certain colors and certain races. This is also the role of newsrooms, where they have a critical role to play in shifting those narratives. Let me stop here.
Thank you so very much. So we know newsrooms will certainly need to deploy AI in their storytelling, in editing, in the management of newsrooms. But this is where we have to also talk about safety issues, legal compliance, and the one and only lawyer on this panel, and I know no other person who's done significant work on freedom of expression laws, like Adebayo. So can you walk us through, data privacy issues, issues of protection, of a human person? Idris spoke of minimizing harm. How does this weigh in a legal context of AI?
All right, thank you very much, sir. First, a disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer.
Oh, I beg, withdraw quickly.
But I've worked on policy issue for so long, so I'm used to being, mistaken to be a lawyer, but I'm not a lawyer. I'm not impersonating for the lawyers in the room. That said, first I want to say thank you to the leadership of CJID for inviting me to join this conversation. And also, I feel very honored to share the podium with you. All of you on this podium are people I admire from a distance, so it's really an honor to sit here with you. To go to the question that was asked, I think the way I want to approach it is to say that data protection, data privacy, we must see it beyond its legality. We must see it as a culture that we need to imbibe. We just came back from the ID for Africa conference in Cape Town, where we had the Data Protection Commissioner for Nigeria, and we were having a conversation with the team, and I was telling them that now you have a data protection law, but you have a long way to go to build a data protection culture in the people. It's easy to have a law, and it's easy to tick boxes to say we have, fulfilled the requirements. But what we actually need in terms of respect for data privacy and data, and in terms of data protection broadly, is to create that culture in our team, in our organization. Newsroom must be deliberate about building that culture. I think in Africa, Mauritius is one of the first country, if not the first country, to enact a data protection law. Right. And I remember we were visiting Mauritius sometimes last year, and the hotel that hosted us, and when we got to the hotel, they required all of us, after collecting our international passport, they required all of us to manually write our names, our email address, our phone numbers, and you could literally, so when they brought out the list for me to write, I could literally see the people that arrived before me, I could see their phone number, I could see their email address, and I was telling the person that was standing next to me that all I need to do is just take a picture of this list. But the point I want to take out of that is to say that it takes more than creating a law. It's about building a culture. When people have a data protection culture, for example, you know that you don't just display people's name and phone numbers publicly, because when you do that, you, in a way, make their data easily available to potential, bad users. Another thing is that we must integrate the culture of data minimization to our practices. And I love to use real examples. When I was coming in, the guys at the entrance, at the registration desk, couldn't find my tag, so they said I can go in. And I got to the door, the security guy said, "Oh, but you have to show me an ID." Fair. So I brought out a copy of my international passport. I showed it to him. Oh, he said, "Okay." He said, "But I still need your ID." And I like, what else do you need? If you have my international passport, you literally have the most important data about me. I could bring you an ID from an organization that is fake, that is generated. So people must learn the culture of data minimization. You should not ask for data that you don't need. A lot of us ask for data that we don't need in our work. When we host events, when we set up organization, we want to collect every data. You go into Cold Stone to buy ice cream, and they're asking you, they want your phone number. For what? I just want to leak ice cream, for God's sake. So it has to be a culture that people have to be deliberate about. So even when we have laws, emphasis must be placed on building that culture within our team. And to wrap up the point, I'm going to give an example of a guy who said he went to his friend's company, and when he got to the friend's company, he saw the staff, they were all smiling, they were all, they look all happy, they were jovial towards the customers and all of that. And he went to his friend who is the CEO and said to the friend that, "How did you get your staff to be this jovial, to be this friendly towards customers, to show love for their work and all of that, that I've been trying to do the same thing in my organization. My friends, I try to force them to smile, to be jovial towards clients and all of that." And the guy said, "You know what? I didn't make them do it. I simply hire people who have this personality." In other words, we have to be deliberate in terms of the kind of people that we put in charge of sensitive data, because data protection is more of an attitude than anything else. There are people who are naturally conscious about privacy, and there are people who are not. So if you are going to have your data center or where you store information, you have to be deliberate about making sure that the person there is very, very conscious about privacy, about data protection. Otherwise, you will just have check boxes. You will get a data protection compliance officer to come and audit you every year. They will tick some boxes and say, "Oh, you have complied." But in your daily practices, there will not be any evidence of data protection or data privacy practices. So I think this is very important. Then lastly, privacy by design is a conversation that I think we are all already used to. Privacy should not be an afterthought. So if you are developing AI system, I know we launched some AI tools today. So for example, were they designed with privacy in mind? So beyond the law asking us to protect, to comply with, with certain provisions, we ourselves must be deliberate about making sure that our system is by design privacy conscious. That way, we limit or reduce the potential for data breaches, for violation of privacy rights, etc. I'll stop there for now. I imagine that you'll still come back to me to share other thoughts.
So let me stay with you a little bit for a few more minutes, Adebayo. If we talk of privacy, and generally in the media, we speak about accountability. That's all the journalists want to do, hold power to account. Now, when we lay our content now on platforms, what's the accountability of algorithms in this new age? How should we understand that? Since in the age of AI, this is where the problem will probably will have to deal with the problem. Not the accountability of the journalists now, but of the algorithm.
Yeah, so I think the conversation about accountability is a global conversation around creating accountability around AI systems. Some of the popular AI systems that we use today, one of the pushbacks that they are getting is around accountability. So whether you're looking at Meta, the Googles of this world, even the generative AI platform like ChatGPT, there is a lot of demands on them to be open about what data sets did you feed your system with, how open are they? Because the problem with AI generally is that AI is being promoted as one magic wand or as one very great tool that has answer to all problems, but it's not always the case. Like Madam Kadaria said the other time, the AI systems that have been created have with them the existing bias or inequality concerns that have always existed. And it is true of Nigeria as much as it is true of Brazil, as much as it is true of Afghanistan or US or wherever you may mention. So in terms of accountability, our responsibility is, number one, to create a third-party audit mechanism. So if you ask the like of Meta, Google, that you need third-party access to your system so that people outside of your system can audit it and be sure that you have not created a bias system. There is always a tendency for them to be closed, for them not to open up their system. And it's a very, very serious debate because you are looking at the intersection of copyright concerns and the need for accountability. So there is a lot of argument from the tech company side that, okay, if you open this system up, then people know exactly how we built it, and the proprietary right that we have can be lost in the process. But it's also go back to the conversation in terms of global, guideline, global regulation for AI, because there has to be standards, and that standard has to be complied with all players. So to ensure accountability, there has to be third-party audits. There is a saying that I love to, use a lot, that if anything if there is anything at all that has a tendency to be abused, it will be abused. As long as the tendency is there. So it is not enough for you to say, oh, we have put in measures in place to ensure that this thing is not abused, our staff are well trained, we have ethical rules. No, a third party must be able to look into that system and say that truly you have put in a strong system in place. And if you haven't, the third party is able to give you feedback. Let's even take our mind back a bit in the accounting world before the age of technology. You do your accounting, you do your books, but yes, you still invite an external auditor to come and validate those books. It's the same thing. Externally, your system must be validated to show that you have done as much as possible to eliminate bias. And as a matter of fact, there is no better way to identify bias, to identify inequality, than for an external party to review your system. As long as you are reviewing your system by yourself, you will not see the bias because you're already part of the system. So the bias is not real to you. It takes somebody who is looking at it from an external perspective to be able to see those bias. And I'm here today with a friend of mine and a colleague from Brazil. She works on inclusive AI in Brazil. And at the center of her work is arguing and promoting or doing advocacy around the need for Brazil's AI system to be inclusive, because Brazil has a white and black population like South Africa. The black population is about 56%. But if you look at the way they train their algorithms, you would think that the white people are the majority. So it takes somebody who doesn't belong to that demography to look into it and say there is something wrong with this demography. And finally, talking about accountability, I want to conclude by using an example of a process that I was part of recently. There is this global coalition called the Freedom Online Coalition, and they recently announced that they were nominating 6 people to join the advisory network. And they, selected an election committee to help them to find those 6 people. And part of the requirement is that they wanted geographical spread because they feel like they are underrepresented in Africa, in Southeast Asia. So they set up these guys. These guys are all guys from the global north, Americans, Europeans, and these guys, they received about 800 applications, and they nominated 6, and in their justification for the 6 people they nominated, so when I looked at the list, the first thing is that I didn't see anybody from Africa. But when I was doing the justification for the people they nominated, they said, oh, this person grew up in the US, schooled in Germany, but he has an African root. So maybe grandparent 4 generations away are African. So they used that to tick the box to say, Africa is represented. And I said, you can't do this because you need somebody who has a lived experience of Africans to be represented in that group for you to really say that you have achieved that DEI objective. So it's the same thing. You need somebody from outside of the system to be able to look at it and kind of audit the system. That is what accountability looks like.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, why not let me just ask you this, and you can then add the points that you want. So, how do you spoke of bias in a very interesting way, actually. And I'm wondering, for the subjects, how do we ask people who are now victims of this torrent of AI onslaught to respond? What's the role of critical thinking? What's the role of systems of verification that we need to build as hedges against the onslaught of these kinds of biases?
Okay, so I think he spoke about some really important things, and I'll sort of just add on to that and then go on to that question. I think part of the problem sometimes we get ourselves into a bit of a tizzy is that we don't necessarily always, at the top of our head, understand that we're talking about essentially human problems, right? So the principles that underpin good journalism should be the same principles that underpin the use of AI in journalism. You're not reinventing the wheel. You understand what I mean?
Right.
So, for example, when you talk about inclusion, right? Do you have a diverse team within your newsroom? Right? How are you sort of taking into account gender representation and other kind of representation? Who are the media owners? Do you have diversity in your sources of information? Those kind of questions are the same kind of questions that you kind of ask of your sort of AI programs. Mm-hmm. And I think what he said about human audits are so important because you sort of put processes, you can put technology, but you have to have an independent arbiter that will then look at those processes and tell you whether that is working or if it isn't working, right? So for me, I was sort of trying to sort of understand if we sort of look at the Nigerian media space, and I sort of like, because this is the space I know more than any other, I sort of like talking about it. If you look at, say, the ownership of media in Nigeria today, the people who own media, why are they media owners? What is the rationale behind them setting up media organizations? For the majority, it's not public good. It is essentially a business that gives them access to people in power, that allows them to exercise power over people in power, most of it for personal gain, right? And so under that kind of circumstance, it will be very difficult for you to sort of see a media organization take on ChatGPT and put that overriding public interest argument in the work that they're doing. But if you did work with, AI on the basis of overriding public good, then what I suspect is happening is that this will influence every aspect of it, from the way you design it, to sort of the people you bring to test it, to everything really, because you will be forced to utilize diversity in the way you do your work. In terms of, what was your second question?
How do you build values like media literacy, and critical thinking as hedges against the abuses of fear?
How do you build media literacy and critical thinking in an audience that can't read and write? I know that you guys want to have very high-level conversations and talk about artificial intelligence and all of that. But the truth is, a large majority of Nigerians can't even read and write. And then we have poverty of infrastructure. So there's a question of access, right? Digital media, social media, all have democratized the way we access and consume information, and it's a very good thing. So on paper, AI can actually be used to leapfrog, and we've seen people doing it using, even for education, right? I think Simi Shagaya has just launched something last year that has become really successful within like a year. He has something like 3,000 subscribers, where he's basically crashing down the time within which people are learning. So it's possible to do it. But the point I'm making is that there are things that have to be driven by policy and regulation. Because often the people that you need, who need media literacy, who need critical thinking, are also people who are disadvantaged. They are poor, they're illiterate, they don't have access to technology, right? And the only body, really, to be honest, that is capable of bridging that divide and that gap, unfortunately, is government and maybe CSOs. And so the conversation around building media literacy, I'd love to say, what we need to do is put into our curriculum media literacy like we see them do at Europe, where they start teaching it from people when children are in nursery schools. But some people are not even in school. We have 13 million that are roaming the streets. How do you deal with those sort of challenges? And that's why when I was talking to Ian earlier, we were talking about the fact that Nigeria is multiple countries. So if you start a media literacy program in a place like Lagos, Abuja, you probably do really well. Critical thinking, you probably do really well. But go to my state in Zamfara and Gusau, where people are being shot as they lie sleeping or being herded to the bush to be kidnapped. What are you going to do about that? So there's a way in which, to a certain extent, I think we need to understand that we have fundamental problems within our communities that AI can help us address, but only if we have the will, the intentionality to do it, because we have real-life problems that mean we are not Europe. Our children are not, sitting in classrooms and learning. They're not sitting in front of laptops. Data is not cheap, etc., etc.
Thank you so much, Kadaria. Very thoughtful comments there. So, Idris, if AI will take jobs in the newsroom, how should we respond?
If you are an investigative journalist or a good journalist, AI is not going to take your job. AI will make your job easier. However, if you fall into any of these three categories of journalists I will mention now, then you should be scared. If you are a press release journalist that waits for press releases from public officials and then you rewrite it, AI will do that thing in 2 minutes. There will be no time for a newsroom to pay you to do that. If you are the journalist that does the said, she said, the disseminator role, all you want is the minister has said they will build 2 hospitals tomorrow. The minister said it in Kuchinguru when it was AI can do that. I mean, the easier way to see this example of this is, look at this conference that we are having now. If the organizers of this conference post the video presentation of this panel and other previous panels on some of the AI platforms, including Dubawa Audio that was launched today, they can write the story of this conference, right? But if you are a good journalist, you can bring in perspectives that AI would never get. You can go and interview that cameraman looking and ask him why he came to venture into to do this for this program. AI would never do that. You would go leave the panelists who are speaking as a good journalist, go outside and interview those who are registering people. Why are you not inside? Are you benefiting? AI would never do that. Essentially, if you are a thorough journalist, AI will not take your job. The third category of journalists that I would say, if you are in that third category, AI will likely take your job is what I call the event journalists in Nigeria. Those ones just wait for events. The Ministry of Health is announcing this. They just go and do this. The Ministry of Education, after they even attend the event, they will now wait for the spokesperson to even send a press release. They were there when the event was going on. They will now wait for the press statement and rewrite it. If you are in that category, AI, in fact, AI has taken your job. They are just wasting money paying you in your newsroom.
In fact, we should be urging AI to take those jobs.
What I'm saying essentially is, if you are ready to do the nitty-gritty of journalism, of investigative journalism, AI cannot take your job. AI cannot help you to cultivate sources. Anybody who understands investigative journalism knows that sourcing, cultivation of sources, building of sources is the fundamental necessity in investigative journalism. AI can never do that. AI can never help you do door-to-door knocking at people and convincing them to talk to you on record. AI will not do that. So for a good investigative journalist, your job is more than secure. AI would only make your job easier. AI would not replace your job. But for the routine journalist, I mean, take another example. Dubawa launched Dubawa Audio today. A great platform that I would recommend for all journalists to use. For a conventional journalist, once you put an audio record in there and you see the claims, you just take the claim and then you fact check it. For a thorough journalist, what you do is, the AI has done to highlight the claim, but you want to listen to the audio to be sure the AI has done it right. That's part of the job of a journalist. Because you must see the AI presentation as a source. And one of the fundamentals of journalism is multiple sourcing. So you must take that claim. So AI has made it easier. It has highlighted claim 1. Let me listen to the audio and see whether AI got it right, whether there was a better context, and all those other factors that we put into it. So for a lazy man journalism, AI is probably likely to take your job, but for quality journalism, for a thorough investigative journalist, our jobs are more than secure. Thank you.
Thank you. So I guess what makes this panel also very balanced is that we have 2 journalists and 2 civil society leaders here. And Victoria, I thought you could also draw from what Idris has been talking in the context of civil society, the values of accountability and transparency that are so striking and important for the work of civil society players. How does this weigh in the work that you do in the age of AI?
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, thank you, Dapo. I maybe because I'm a lawyer and I'm a researcher as well, the first thing I would want to talk about is evidence and how AI can be leveraged to improve evidence and data, use of evidence and data in accountability campaigns of civil society organizations, including media organizations. In this time of artificial intelligence, data is key for success. What artificial intelligence does is that it enhances our access to evidence, it enhances our access to vast amounts of information and data in real time. And for us as civil society organizations, it's almost impossible for you to run any effective campaign for accountability. Let's say for natural resources or natural resource wealth, for instance. If you're making claims about fuel subsidy, if you're making claims that the resources have not been spent in a certain way, you need to have the figure, how much has been generated, how much has been spent, how much has been remitted to the federation account, how much is unaccounted for. So in either you need data to be able to drive credible accountability campaigns. And one other area that is important is the importance of homegrown data generation and analysis in these areas. I think is very critical. And we can embrace AI as a lever to for southern organizations to begin to generate data that can be trusted and respected across the globe. A second area where civil society can leverage AI is to begin to push for ethical regulation of AI. A lot of conversations have already been had in the road about ethical regulation of artificial intelligence. And one way to look at is the EU. I think the EU AI Act is the first regulation on artificial intelligence. We don't have to replicate that or duplicate that, but it provides a model or a template for us to look at. What the AI Act in Europe, what it has done is to provide certain provisions which all AI systems must comply with in order to have access to their internal market. What they call them, I think they call them essential requirements. So what is very unique, why I'm championing for us to look to Europe is because their AI Act is risk-based. So what I mean by risk-based is that the different applications are analyzed and are classified according to the risk that they pose. So if they higher the risk of an AI tool, the higher the regulation. The lower the risk, the lower the regulation. Other areas that CSS can leverage artificial intelligence technology to amplify the advocacy effort. Another way is to think about the impacts of civic space. When we are using robotic systems to generate information, generate news, generate report, you can get sued based on stories or reports or campaigns produced, disseminated using robotic systems. You may be sued over something a robot wrote. So as long as it has the organizational logo, it has a organizational credit. So it means that the organization is going to take credit for that. And it's something that the civil society needs to begin to develop. What are the metrics for accountability? What are the metrics for legal protection? Let's say, for instance, do automated processes, would they enjoy the same legal protection as human journalists? Would they enjoy the same protection as activists? Imagine if you used a code behind an automation to generate something that resulted in harm to another person, and you are in court and requested to reveal it. Will you try to defend it, or will you still protect it at the direct secret? And another related part to that is the impact on civic space. Sometimes when AI can crunch materials from different sides and use it to create a report and you put it out there, it can expose certain kinds of people to harm. Sometimes because the news is trending, many people are in a hurry to share photos, sometimes photos with images of children on them, sometimes images of certain people. It could be sexual minorities, it could be women. You can expose them to greater harm by sharing that information in that manner. And this is where civil society needs to start coming in, to start championing for ethical use of AI. And finally, I would like to talk about the importance of maintaining privacy, anonymity, and confidentiality. I think these are essential. Sometimes these words are used interchangeably, but they don't mean the same thing. For most of us, some of us that work in research organizations, we constantly talk about how we can sometimes use codes to replace individuals or to remove any identifiers. The essence of anonymity is to ensure that we don't provide any information that could make it easy to locate a particular respondent who has shared information for sensitivity purposes. And another thing is information that is shared with us in those contexts as activists, as civil society organizations. Sometimes even whistleblowers share information with us. That information should be kept secure. It should only be shared with those individuals or organizations that have a legitimate need to access this, but protecting the interests and the identity of those who share information with us. These are some of the areas that civil society organizations need to take into account as the world of AI continues to boom. There is a critical role for civil society to play, and these are just some of the suggestions on areas that we need to start focusing the attention on.
Thank you very much, Victoria. So at this point, I want Adebayo. I'm racing through quickly, hoping that the audience might want to ask one or two questions. So, Boye, if you can look in the direction of the kind of collaboration we'll need to build for the safety and ethical challenges that we face in this new era of AI, can you give some thoughts to that?
Absolutely, and I think it's helpful. So I think, Madam Kadaria, when you were going to, in your first intervention, you had said, oh, you didn't know about AI and all of that, but in your second intervention, I realized that you actually know about AI. Yeah, and it's very important. I'd like to do this everywhere I go to speak, especially when we're having technology-related conversation. You know, this technology, AI and all of that can come across as a myth, as something that is an exclusive preserve of some certain set of people. But that's really a myth. Technology is just an enabler. It is not necessarily the body of knowledge itself. So when we talk about AI ethics, there is no better people to shape AI ethics in the media, for example, than people like you who have been in the space for so long. The principle, the values that will be used to shape AI ethics are things you have done over the years. So there should be no conversation around those issues where you should not be in the room to contribute to it. So it's very important that we understand that, and the tech bros, they will not come and define AI ethics for us, because they are only looking at the technology side of things. They are not looking at how it impacts society, how it enhances existing discrimination, etc., and all of that. So talking about collaboration, the collaboration that needs to happen in terms of deployment of AI, whether in the newsroom or even in any context at all, is such that we need to look at interdisciplinary, type of collaboration. There are a lot of people who need to get a seat at the table. For example, you can't talk about AI and human rights without bringing human rights advocates, human rights experts into the room. So if you're talking about AI ethics, for example, you need philosophers in the room. You need people who have worked on ethical issues, on ethical principles for so long in the room. So if you are defining, for example, AI ethics for the practice of journalism, you have to go and look for the journalists who design the ethical guidelines for the Next of this world, for the Premium Times of this world. That is how you do it. You cannot rely on the technology guy to come up with that, principle for you, because you are just integrating it into a technology. And this technology does not stand on its own. It's garbage in, garbage out. It's what you feed into it that is going to give to you. So it's very important for us to look at it that way. So when we talk about collaboration, what is important is that we must be very deliberate about it. We must be deliberate about collaboration. So for example, let's use the Nigeria example. Nigeria is currently working on its AI strategy, and I spoke to one of the people who are working on developing that strategy. I'm like, okay, when are you going to bring civil society into the conversation? I said, oh, don't worry, when we finish, they are still going to I said, this is exactly how you get it wrong. You cannot come up with a strategy, then say you don't want to bring media, civil society into the conversation. You have already made a mistake. The foundation is already problematic. The collaboration has to happen at the foundational level so that you can benefit from multi-sectoral perspective in what you are building. I can tell you for a fact that by the time the Nigeria AI strategy is going to be released, there are things that people like us will see that the people who are developing it will never see, because it is not their forte. It is not their primary concern. So they will not see it. They will not see how this thing impacts human rights. They will not see how this thing affects society. They will not see how this thing perpetuates existing inequalities, etc. They will only say, okay, how can we use AI to create jobs? Those are the kind of things they will see. How can we use AI to galvanize the economy? Because that's the primary concern of government in this part of the world. We want to create jobs. We want to tell people that we are working. Oh, the government has done this. Our GDP has moved from this position to that position. But how about how this thing impacts people in their real life experiences? And the painful thing about all this conversation is that as much as these tools can amplify opportunities, benefits, they also amplify risk, existing issues. So if there are people that have been discriminated against, AI will help amplify that discrimination. So that is why collaboration is essential in the development of AI system. We have to bring as many people as possible to the table, cross-pollination of ideas. Don't assume you know it. You don't know it all. You need as much perspective as possible. And I think that in our part of the world, that's really one of the challenges we have. We really don't understand multi-stakeholder principle. We only pay lip service to it. If government wants to pass a law, they will draft the law and they'll probably tell you 2 days before a public hearing at National Assembly for you to come and say, what do you think about the law? It's too late. Multi-stakeholderism has to be deliberate. It's the same thing in terms of when we have this AI conversation. And I think that at our level, individual newsrooms, we need to be deliberate about it, because one of the mistakes we also make is that a lot of time we are waiting for government to set the rules. we don't have to wait for government to set the rules. We should be setting the rule. As a matter of fact, if we are proactive enough to set the rule, by the time government wakes up, government will consult us because we have shown leadership. We have shown this is how it is done. And the good thing is that this is a global conversation. You don't really need approval from anybody to engage in whether the UNESCO process, whether the Global Digital Compact process, whether, there are so many of these processes, OECD, etc., that are ongoing, where we can get a lot of insights about how things are being done. I'm Nigerian. I'm not involved in AI conversation in Nigeria that the Nigerian government is having, but I'm involved in the AI conversation that the US government is having. I'm involved in the AI conversation that the G20 government is having. I'm a member of the T20, literally the global think tank for the G20. So the space is democratized. We can lean on knowledge, expertise from all over the world. Everybody's trying to own their skills. Everybody's trying to demonstrate that they are the ones that have the expertise. And when we have this conversation about AI expertise, I always make a joke that when you say you are not an AI expert, like you said, the only difference between you and that guy or that woman on LinkedIn that has on his or her profile that says that, AI thought leader, etc., and all of that, is that somebody is audacious, maybe religious, calling those things that be not as though they are. Because what they are literally doing is that they are positioning themselves. This area is so new, anybody can pay attention to it and claim expertise. The first time I was invited to speak on an AI issue was 2020. I've never done anything here, and I was asking myself that, why did they invite me? I had to reach out to my boss, and I was like, do you know anybody who can speak on AI so that I can recommend them to these guys? And he was like, well, I don't know anybody, but the truth is there is nobody. So it's whoever puts their hat on the ring first that will become the expert. And because of that, I took up the opportunity. I spoke at the conference. It was a virtual conference. The following year, they invited me to Brazil. It was held in Brazil. They invited me to Brazil to come and speak at the physical conference. So I'm also saying this to demystify all these myths about, some people are the expert.
Yeah.
If you are a journalist, if you are a human rights defender, if you are a lawyer, you have a role to play in AI development, conversation, and building AI systems. Don't ever feel like this is just a tech thing. There is a role you can play because we are the one that will determine what AI implementation will look like in our workplace, in our country, in our jurisdiction, wherever you find yourself.
So let me come back, and allow you to make some last points. I think the point that Boye is making very important. War is too important to be left for soldiers alone to decide. It's total nonsense to think that when you're talking about something so important as AI, you just want only tech people in the room. and that's why, the ethical discussions around it is far more important. I'd like to take one or two people from the audience, if they would. One lady, one gentleman, perhaps that's the way to look at it. Okay, I'll take the lady here. Perhaps you can just shout here, and then we can I don't think there's a mic out there. Oh, okay, thank you. So we have just a few minutes, so please just make it very short. 1 minute.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maria Shaibu from BUKFM. My question is to you, Mr. Idris. You talk about the ethical issues of reporting, where you speak about transparency and journalists not allowing AI to replace the work of the brain and all that. My concern is originality. How can AI ensure the originality of the information it gives to the users? Because I think that one is very relevant and it's very important as long as you're a journalist. The information you're supposed to give has to be original. So how can AI ensure this?
I'd rather that the next person just ask the question so that we are through with. Okay, I think that's gentleman.
Thank you so much. My name is Kabir Yusuf. I work with Premium Times. So first, in terms of AI taking jobs of our colleagues in the media, I must say that already AI is taking jobs. And for instance, the New York Times today, they have a smaller team than 20 years ago. And what the publisher spoke on in March was that they are even going to have a smaller team by 2030 or even 2040. So it will continue to take the jobs. And I would like to ask you, sir, what do you think about the role of AI, especially in copy editing? First, yeah. And then you spoke about, collaboration with especially tech companies, and why we must not allow them, to dominate. But these tech companies are very powerful. They dominate the traffic and engagement in digital world. And so I want to see, it's a must, we must be on them to partner, but some guys will say that, our purpose or interest do not always align with theirs. So how do we, find a way to, partner with them and do a very critical work in the coming years? Thank you.
So I think the way we'll do it, Idris, you can start, and then we'll just use that as a way of rounding up for all the speakers. So Idris,
I think to the first question, I think you essentially suggested the response. AI cannot produce original journalistic work. AI cannot. Because basically what AI does is present what others somewhere have done and they have placed online. So it essentially tries to utilize a lot of this information. Therefore, for journalists who want to do original reporting, you must go and do it yourself. AI can help in a lot of areas. AI can help in research. AI can even help in conceptualizing story ideas. AI can help in so many areas. But in terms of the original reporting itself, the real journalism, the groundwork, interviewing sources, interviewing eyewitnesses, and the rest, AI would never do that for you. And that's the quality that I said AI cannot replace in journalists. So journalists who are really ready to do the real journalism have nothing to be scared of about AI. As to the second question about AI in newsrooms and challenging tech companies, I think it's better we collaborate as a news media rather than each individual media organization doing its own. I really think if we were well organized, it's something the NGE or the NUJ should take a lead on. But when the NGE is in Kogi giving Yaya Bello something, NUJ is in Delta giving Tompolo, you wonder what do they discuss? I mean, but really, we must collaborate to take on, especially because of the kind of country that we find ourselves in. I think editors, when they meet themselves, must raise these kind of conversations. We had talking about it in one of the panels earlier, about how the media is essentially not looking at, the news media is not looking in the right direction in terms of its sustainability, and that we can make a lot more money than what we currently do, just patronizing politicians and the rest. So basically, what I'm saying is, for good journalists, AI will not replace our job. And the easiest way for journalists to ensure that their jobs are not threatened is to improve their capacity. Journalists must be deliberate about capacity development. There is no alternative to it. If you refuse to improve, then definitely you are one of those who companies will first lay off when they have challenges.
So let's move quickly to Boye.
Thank you very much.
Boye, just 1 minute.
All right, let me also try to just address the two questions at once. The issue around AI taking jobs, I think what eventually happens is that it's disruption. That's what technology does, it disrupts. So you would even find that with the introduction of new technology, more jobs are created. So in the aggregate of it, if people lose job, it is not because there are now lesser jobs available. It's mostly because there are a lot of people who have not updated their skills to be able to exist or survive the disruption that the technology has brought. So the right conversation to have is, how do we train our human resource to adapt to the disruption that this technology is bringing? Every technology company needs certain skill sets that already exist for them to do their work effectively. So reskilling should be the conversation, and part of the thing that G20 is currently looking at with respect to governance of AI is around that issue of reskilling, training people to have the skill necessary to survive the age of AI. Then I think the second question about authenticity of information, right? Originality of information. AI, like technology, is an enabler. I think you killed it in your response. The people who will use this wrongly are people who are very lazy. If you know your work, for example, if I'm going to write about my work, if you put the same questions to AI and you ask me to write about the same thing, AI cannot write it better than me. But let me tell you what AI can do. What AI will write can be better structured than the way I will write my own. So what I even do sometimes when I write something is I put it on an AI system to rewrite it. And then the structuring looks better and all of that. So we have to see AI tools or AI system as a tool, not an escape route for laziness, whereby you are outsourcing your work to some technology. And I think that's what we need to do. You just have to have that sense of duty, whereby you see this thing as a tool, understand how it works, turn it your errand boy, literally, but don't outsource your responsibility to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Adriana?
Okay, I'll try and be quick. I don't want to belabor the point, but I think when we talk about journalism, people think we're talking about content creation. And I think that is where the problem comes. Journalism is about accountability. First and foremost, it's about holding everyone accountable. It is about, setting an agenda for conversation and driving that conversation because there is underlying public good in what you're doing. No machine can do that, right? And I think part of the problem that we see, again, to come back to the Nigerian media space, is social media ate our lunch. But social media ate our lunch because we were not paying attention. Yeah. And when social media came, instead of us to go back to basics and understand the importance of building trust with our audiences, of actually doing journalism properly, we decided we wanted to compete with blogs. We decided that they will actually even become the source of our news. So now, generally, there's very little differentiation between our media and social media. We don't have the depth, we don't have the courage, we just don't do the work that we're supposed to do. Ironically, at a time when it is needed more than ever. So the point is that now there's an opportunity. AI is going to be even faster. This thing is moving like brrr. So the Nigerian media needs to basically sit down and understand whether they want to actually differentiate themselves. And differentiation is about doing the work that matters and doing it properly and utilizing AI to make it work, right? So you build trust with your audiences if you do what you're supposed to do. So yes, I think AI can be a game changer for the media, but we kind of have to be intentional, like he said, about what we're doing. And it's important that regulation, processes, all are part of sort of inclusion and diversity, and you have multidimensional teams across all sectors sitting down to do this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you so very much. Yes. I think... oh, sorry. Forgive me. You have 1 minute to just round up. Forgive me.
Okay, thank you so much. I just agree with what most of the things other panelists have said. My closing line would be for us to prevent AI. If we are afraid of, if AI must not take our jobs, one thing we must do is to go back to the classrooms, to kill a lot of things that is actually preparing us for AI takeover. And what are some of those things? We need to kill handout education, whereby we are taught to say things in a certain way. We are taught in ways that separate creativity. If you ask an average child what is democracy, is the government of the people, by the people, for the people. We need to create the kind of educational system that allow people to agree, to disagree, to say, no, this is not government by the people. Because that sort of thinking is what makes us different from artificial intelligence. Another thing is we need to kill bandwagonism. I still recall that young girl, Jadrolita, when she started making AI systems. Before you knew it, a lot of other TikTokers started doing the same thing. When somebody won the Guinness Book of World Record, everybody started doing the same thing. So we need to kill bandwagonism. We need to start investing recreating and improving our educational curricula in a way that it encourages entrepreneurship, in a way that encourages imagination, a way that encourages innovation and creativity. And that way we are preparing our minds, we are preparing our younger generation to do the kind of things that technology will not be able to supplant. So that would be my closing line, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in saying thank you to this 5-star team. Thank you very much.
Wow, amazing. So it's time for photographs. We'll do that quickly. I'm not sure how we'll superimpose Madam Victoria Ibezim-Ohaeri on this one, but let's just take this one, find a way around that later.